The Twi'lek people welcome us to Ryloth, where the planet's rotation has created two vastly different regions, one of perpetual light and one of perpetual darkness.
What's up, MetaNerds? This video will be the complete history of Ryloth, using everything from both legends and canon to provide as much information as possible on the home world of the Twi'lek people. We'll cover everything from its location in the galaxy, flora, fauna, economy, government, and the major historical events that all played out on Ryloth. A world that was always being dragged into the conflicts of the major powers of the galaxy, most notably the Jedi-backed Republic and Sith-run empires. But also the cartels. Be it for slavery or spice, Ryloth was one of the most raided planets in galactic history. So we have a ton of stuff to cover, but before we head down to Ryloth, I want to thank this video's sponsor, Raid Shadow Legends. Raid Shadow Legends is the hottest mobile game on the planet, and now it's available on desktop. There are 10 dungeons, each with their own powerful dungeon bosses, in addition to a fully voice-acted story campaign as well, with 12 unique locations. Pick your champions from the 13 different factions that include everything from dwarves, orcs, undead, and mighty human knights. Build your own team to take on any challenge, as the combinations are insane with 460 unique champions, and make some friends in the over 200,000 active clans, totaling 25 million active users. Throw on top of that the customization for every character and weapon, all interacting with each other in special ways, and you can see why so many people are loving Raid Shadow Legends. What I find most addictive is smashing through hordes of lower enemies only to be just barely defeated by the boss, and then switching out my champions and doing some upgrades to make my team stronger, returning to that dungeon and finally conquering it. Everything you need to upgrade and unlock characters is gained by fighting through these different dungeons, and Raid is getting even more content with its biggest update ever, the Doom Tower. With 120 floors, numerous secret challenge rooms, and 12 top bosses. This will really test your team, so they bumped the champions up to 500 and added a bunch of perks as well as special Valentine's Day events and tons of tournaments for February. You can help support the channel by downloading Raid Shadow Legends using the links down in the description. By doing it with our link, new players will get a welcome pack with 50,000 silver, 50 gems, 5 mystery shards, 1 energy refill, 1 day XP boost, 1 clan boss key, and a free champion, Shaman. You get all that awesomeness completely free for the next 30 days only. You can find me with the name MetaNerdz, and it really is just that easy. Click on the link in the description, and I'll see you in game. But let's head to grid coordinates R17 of the galactic map, in the Outer Rim territories right on the major Corellian-run trade route, with notable neighbors like Geonosis, Tatooine, and Naboo. The Ryloth star system contained a single sun, and was in the second orbital position between planets Mon Bala and Ortuma. A Goldilocks zone to the extreme, as Mon Bala was molten rock, and Ortuma was just covered in miles of ice. Ryloth's terrain was as varied as Earth's, with areas of forests, plains, ice caps, deserts, and mountains. And the atmosphere was relatively thin, but still plenty of breathable air to get it classified as Type 1, just like most of the major planets in the galaxy. But the weather was apocalyptic. This was the result of a complicated interaction between the powerful sunlight, the 5 moons that orbited Ryloth, its liquid water core, and the fact that the planet was tidally locked, meaning that one side of Ryloth always faced the sun, while the other side always faced away, a dark side just like our moon. This made it so the Terminator line, the place where those two sides meet, being the prime real estate on Ryloth, with the most temperate conditions being neither too hot or too cold. But as it made its 305 standard day journey around the sun, it would get closer or farther away from this star, making for incredible weather events during these seasons. The most frightening were called heat storms, which brought temperatures of 300 degrees Celsius or 572 degrees Fahrenheit, with this day-night differential causing incredible winds that were recorded as high as 500 kilometers per hour or 310 miles per hour, which is more than 4 times the hottest places on Earth, and about twice the wind speed of a Category 5 hurricane. Because of this, the early Twi'leks grew their civilizations underground, and the immense networks of caves that connected the entire planet. A perfect place to call home, as those caves also contained well springs that were fed by that liquid water core. Plant life consisted of various green trees and bushes, with stunning bioluminescent varieties on the night side, which would glow in these bright whites and purples. There was abundant wildlife here as well, with the blurg becoming a trusty mount, and the gut cur being fierce predators. The 3-meter long can cells would act as a flying mount, the Rykrit, which was a sort of mix of a boar and a cow, and two of the most nightmare-inducing creatures to be found on any world, the Dalsham and Lilac. Most of the animals would primarily live on the dark side of Ryloth, but the Lilacs roamed the arid sections of the Brightlands, in places like the Crater Sea, which would also become the home to a major pod race course.
Now, judging by the blinding sun overhead, I'd have to say we're in the Brightlands. And it's hot out here, folks. Worse than Tatooine. Luckily, we're in the coolest region of the Brightlands, so hopefully our racers won't overheat too quickly. Be sure to watch for the great tusks, one of this area's most well-known features. And then it's out to the Crater Sea, where we're sure to see some great combat action.
There were some other notable locations, like a secret bounty hunting guild fortress established in a series of mountains dubbed the Lonely Five, and a 2-day walk into the Brightlands from the village of Bashka would have you arriving at a Jedi-established enclave for liberated slaves. And there was even a Sith Academy set up on world to train spies and assassins for Lord Khan's Brotherhood of Darkness, likely set up somewhere on the dark side of the planet. On a side note, if you watched our Bib Fortuna video, you'll remember that his ultimate goal was to take power of the Hutt Empire so that he could conquer Ryloth and help establish academies to develop his people into spies and mercenaries that would be useful to the Empire. And then there was Ryloth's biggest tourist spot, the Floating Rock Gardens. Those insane winds and series of caves created a once-in-a-galaxy phenomena, where enormous boulders would float on the strong currents like stone clouds. Eventually, stones of all sorts were caught in the currents, and people often added new ones, creating for a beautiful assortment that made this phenomena seem even more magical. For just a small fee, tourists would come from all over to witness the spectacle, and many would add their own small stones into the streams of wind shooting out of various caves. Though this was allowed, the local Twi'lek guides would teach the visitors that there is much to be gained in quietly contemplating the natural movements of these stones. How we are all like these stones, things caught in a current too complex to understand, and without which we would come crashing down in an instant, smashing to pieces if this invisible force failed to keep us afloat. A meditation that was meaningful to ancient Rylothans, but was lost on most Coruscanti visitors. But of course, floating, metaphysically significant rocks were not what most people thought of when picturing Ryloth. More like spice rocks, the mind-altering drug that could be processed by the substance Ryll that was only found on Ryloth. But that was only after their first contact with alien species. When the planet was discovered by the Old Republic's explorers 10,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, the Twi'leks they discovered were not a spacefaring race. They used windmills to turn their most hostile climate feature into a way to power their homes which were carved into the sides of mountains as they increasingly found ways to move out from their deep cave systems. Their main sources of food were a cultivated mold, as well as domesticated Rykrits for meat. The most populous race in the Republic was humans, and they immediately took an interest in the females of this twin-headed species. And it wasn't long before they realized that they could interbreed with these generally lean, athletic, and multicolored people. This ability of a human to mate with a Twi'lek, and other species like the Zabrak, is due to the fact that they were created by the ancient Rakata mother machine known as a Shah.
I am a Shah, the mother machine. My children are as numerous as the Rakata once were. I called them Twi'lek, Zabrak, Eshka.
Now the Twi'lek government was in the form of the Clan Council, located in the capital city of Lesu. Their council consisted of the 5 males that represented the heads of the 5 clans spread over Ryloth. This government would stay intact for thousands of years, even with its peculiar practice that when one council member died, all of the others would walk into the Brightlands until they eventually died of exposure or by being ripped apart by beasts. But one decision that the council either encouraged or failed to ban was the practice of families selling off their women to these new alien visitors. Remember, Ryloth is on one of the most lucrative trade routes in the galaxy. Now with Republic technology, this Outer Rim world was connected to the deep core, and could partake in the galactic economy. These aliens had no interest in their mediocre meats and farmed algae, but the female Twi'lek figure caught the eye of nearly all other alien species. From humans to Hutts, Weequay to Chiss, everyone seemed to be attracted to them. So the Twi'lek families sacrificed their women on the altar of high technology. Parents sending their daughters off never to be seen again, pleasing their buyers with exotic dances, or often much worse, while the rest of the Twi'leks were able to get their foot in the galactic door. It should be noted that merchants found ways around the Republic's anti-slavery laws by simply having these girls sign that they were not being forced into service, and that they were only selling those services on a contract with a start date and stop date, being paid with an outlined amount of credits. This didn't take into account the social pressure that all but forced them to become slaves, or rather I should put it so we don't get sued by the Hutt cartel lobby, forced them to become indentured servants. Many of these families would use these ill-earned credits to travel the galaxy and set up respectable businesses, creating a whole new life on places as diverse as Coruscant and Tatooine, growing their own families for many generations, and feeling no cultural ties to Ryloth anymore, or any sense of connection to this original sin of their species. And to be fair, we must imagine that there were still countless Twi'leks that either found employment with the alien visitors, or males that also sold themselves into indentured servitude, making it so they were barely above slavery in that first generation, but over time could partake in the galactic dream. But as this business model grew, Twi'leks started to enslave each other. No longer families setting up the contracts, but Twi'lek warlords would organize to attack villages and round up women for the off-world markets. And they would either kill the men or keep them to be worked to death as slaves, mining the latest vice to be discovered on Ryloth. With the Republic's advanced civilization came the technology that could detect the medicinal properties of a substance in the ground that would come to be known as Ryll, named after Ryloth. This was a gold rush for drugs, as there were several forms of drugs classified as spice that could be developed into a wide array of helpful, therapeutic medicines, or into any manner of stimulant, depressant, or hallucinogen for recreational use. And there was the fact that just like with the contracted workers loophole, the fact that this could be legally mined and sold if intended for medicinal use, meant that you could legally open up a spice mine on Ryloth. This is what finally drew in the big players, as the small-time Twi'lek slavers were conquered and either destroyed or hired out to manage the operations of galaxy-spanning cartels, like those of the Hutts, Pikes, and Phalines of Black Sun. This explosion of criminal elements would remain a permanent feature of Ryloth from the year 4800 BBY on, resulting in 24% of the population being off-worlders, and their global population being only 1.5 billion, with the vast majority of Twi'leks leaving their homeworld, abandoning it to the rule of crime. It is true that ostensibly their council still ruled, but we must assume that with the amounts of underworld credits flowing into Ryloth, and the fact that it would remain this way for thousands of years, the majority of the actual decision makers must have been in some way corrupted by these alien crime lords. And then what grew out of this that made it even worse is that because it was now a powerful economic world, specifically within criminal elements, it was always attracting Jedi and Sith. The Jedi continuously chasing down some dangerous new spice shipment, high-level thug or assassin that was somehow linked back to Ryloth. And then on the other end, there were Sith that were often working alongside these criminals, which meant that during the several wars between the Old Republic and Sith Empire, not to mention the civil wars amongst the Jedi and Sith themselves, Ryloth was often dragged into military-scale warfare in addition to the endless cartel wars. This was just another reason for the Twi'leks to feel even less of an attachment to their homeworld or have any desire to return. But it should be noted that the most famous of their species were all born here, even though only a small percentage of Twi'leks ever saw Ryloth. Anun Bandara was the Jedi watchman for the Ryloth system, and he would detect the presence of a young Aayla Secura, while Beezer and Bib Fortuna, Cham and Harris and Dula were all born on-world, as were Senators Conestrel, Cham Frey Ka, and Orn Free Ta. During the Clone Wars that would break out in 22 BBY, Ryloth's location in the Outer Rim meant that it was one of the first to fall to the CIS, where it was secured with a massive blockade and heavy troop presence on-world. Senator Orn Free Ta wanted to keep the planet loyal to the Republic, but his people were pretty evenly split. Though some must have heard the reports of natives being used as living shields, you could understand why these people felt abandoned by the Republic. Still in the middle of a war between two superpowers, now 10,000 years after Ryloth was discovered. And that war would ravage nearly every city, and then their social structure was degraded even further. When the Empire took control, they did rein in some of the crime. Palpatine could not permit lawlessness, but he would leave some cartels in power to manipulate his people, though not letting them control an entire world or monopolize the spice Ryll. And while that might have seemed nice at first, the human high culture policy would push down all Twi'leks to the role of second-class citizens. Even the top members of the 5 ruling clan families could find themselves enslaved, hauled off to work some Imperial site. It did motivate many of them to secretly support the Rebel Alliance, and Ryloth would become a frequent pickup point for materials and intel. By the year 14 BBY, Ryloth was ruled by Moff Delian Moors, who chose to reside on one of their moons instead of being surrounded by the head-tails-on world. Over the years, there would be the loss of at least one Imperial-class Star Destroyer in Cham Syndulla's attempt to eliminate Vader and Palpatine in one devastating blow. And Hera and the Spectres were able to take out an Arquitens-class command cruiser and steal a Quasar Fire-class carrier. Shenanigans that eventually brought Grand Admiral Thrawn to Ryloth to lock it down. Imperial garrisons would remain here for an entire year after the Battle of Endor, finally fleeing in the year 5 ABY, upon which an ex-rebel fighter would represent Ryloth to the New Republic Senate. Notice I say to, but not in the NR, as finally this world would try to remain neutral, being allies to the New Republic, but not in their Senate or under their authority. And this did secure peace for an entire generation, but the old specter of crime lords was still haunting this world. With Jabba's death, there were countless small-scale thugs trying to be the next big mob boss. And on Ryloth, it would be the Nikto crime lord Rinrin Vindai that was growing a cartel that would rival the Great Jabba's. Eventually, this cartel was so powerful that the Twi'lek emissary traveled to Hosnian Prime to make a plea to the Senate, saying this problem on Ryloth would grow to infect the entire galaxy.
Today, Rin Riven's cartel presents a danger to Ryloth's future, and to free trade in our part of the galaxy. Tomorrow, however, it could threaten the rule of law in the New Republic itself, as the Hutts did in both the Old Republic and the Empire.
Leia Organa would personally investigate the rapid rise of Rinrin Vindai's cartel, finding the first signs of the First Order, as funding to these criminals was coming from some military organization in the unknown regions. The FO using the spice trade to make incredible returns on their investments, while simultaneously corrupting the population of their future enemy in the New Republic. Once this war came to a head and the Resistance was nearly destroyed on Crate, General Organa would reach out to her contacts on Ryloth, who allowed the Resistance to set up a secret base in one of the planet's cave systems. Some Twi'leks thought this was going to get them dragged into another galactic-scale war, and the Resistance was betrayed to the FO after they made it known that they had 5 days to give up the Resistance before they would put their fleets in orbit for a full blockade. The FO launched a raid on the Resistance location, compounding the devastating loss on Crate, and even less of them limped off this time. In a way, this betrayal on Ryloth was the lowest point of the Resistance, convincing individuals like Poe Dameron that no place in the galaxy would welcome them. But knowing the history of this planet, it is no shock that the Twi'leks were afraid of Ryloth being involved in another war, being the enemies of a superpower that had taken out an entire system, just the latest of wars in the 10,000 plus year history of this world, in which Ryloth could hardly be said to have benefited. So that's it for the complete history of Ryloth, but you definitely want to hear these cool facts and behind the scenes stuff. There are some discrepancies in the lore, like it's said to have a night side, that Twi'leks can only live along that thin slice right up against the Terminator, but then it also says that it has a 30 standard hour day rotation. That was added because of its appearance in the Clone Wars show, and was later confirmed in the Essential Atlas. But the harsh weather conditions remain confirmed in the lore, while they were also supposedly caused by the planet being tidally locked. And then we have the fact that the Twi'leks were brought by the Tho-Yor to Tython in 36,000 BBY, but Ashah, the Mother Machine, claims to have made them around 10,000 BBY. Grand Moff Tarkin had a Twi'lek administrator at the secret outpost of the Maul installation, where they would oversee hundreds if not thousands of Twi'lek slave laborers. And the way Twi'leks carved their homes out of the cliff walls and caves was based on the Anasazi people, specifically the ruins that are found in the Mesa Verde National Park. Now a lot of this info in canon comes from Ultimate Star Wars and the Galactic Atlas, as well as the novels Tarkin and Bloodline. And in Legends, it was the Essential Atlas, Clone Wars Campaign Guide, and the New Essential Chronology. So that's it for the complete breakdown of Ryloth. Thanks for watching to the end, you guys are the real meta nerds out there. If you want to help the channel, the best thing you can do is to hit that like button. It's what helps promote the channel on YouTube so that other people can see it. And of course, if you want to see more videos like this, be sure to subscribe. We've got tons of videos, all kinds of different species, ships, planets, complete life stuff, all kinds of good, great stuff there. And be sure to check out the links down in the description, where you can find all kinds of cool Star Wars metal print art from Display, free Audible audiobooks, and other affiliate links that help support the channel without any extra cost to you. But you can also find our PayPal and Patreon. Special thanks to our supporters over on Patreon, especially our $25 tier, Chris Garcia, Seraph Diaz, Cass Costello, C7Go, and Matthew Beltrami. But most important of all, remember, when the aliens arrive, don't give up your women for their high tech, And definitely don't let them scan your soil for addictive drugs. And the Force will be with you, always.